Okay, how's it all going with y'all? Y'all? So we're just gonna keep going on. Gonna read next article in this series. We read the moon article last time. Remember that we found Roy Cohn was so that would be in the last video, at the very end. Roy Cohn as the lawyer for the Moonies and all the Buckley family connections to the Moonies. Um, So we're on to the next one. This is about the East Side Conservative Club, um, which is around the William F. Buckley crowd, and I think you'll start to see some familiar faces here. So, and it might rehash some of the stuff in other videos, but minds hear it again. So this is Executive Intelligence View Review, May 4th, 1982. The East Side Conservative Club: A Threat to National Security, by Scott Thompson Tate. While the British Crown mobilized every asset, hope we're good on the mic, and called every blackmailed shit again U.S. backing against Argentina, President Ronald Reagan was whisked off last month on a fantasy island vacation in British Barbados with William F. Buckley, the serpent-tongued leader of the East Side Conservative Club in New York's Silk Stocking District. That's how William F. Buckley kind of sounds like Stewie Griffin. They look kind of the same too. They have the same slick back, three pieces of hair and all that. Well, the president was distanced, if not charmed, by Bill Buckley. Sources report that his brothers James, who is a U.S. Assistant Secretary of State, and other East Side Conservative Club members holding posts in the Reagan administration, joined forces with Vice President George Bush, White House Chief of Staff James Baker III, and Secretary of State Al Haig. Now, I believe that it's James Baker um, and these individuals that Operation Condor, where you have the Cuban uh, exile terrorist operations. These are kind of the people that pulled that off. And Secretary of State Al Haig to block the United States from invoking the Monroe Doctrine and to hand U.S. foreign policy over to the British Crown. This is about the Falklands. Um, the U.S. Monroe policy is that we protect Latin America from foreign influences. And if you remember, part of that is Napoleon III tried to install a Habsburg in Mexico against the Republican forces there as a puppet. Um, and also, British Lord Palmerston was in on that. The same crowd that's active during that entire period, the entire Napoleonic period. Um, and it was a real threat because Maximilian I, who they were trying to install, was willing to work with the Confederacy, run by the Scottish Rite and all this, to destroy the Union. And this is what this bent of Catholics, the rad trad monarchist Catholics, are trying to justify is and promote is like Maximilian I and the Confederacy and all of this, simply because it maintains the aristocratic principles. It is not anything to do with the Catholic faith. It is all to do with protecting aristocrats. Meanwhile, most of these people are, uh, low-level farmers or neats or something that like the LARP. They aren't really going to benefit from an aristocratic society. And the same thing was with Lefebvre. Yeah, Lefebvre is right to defend the Latin Mass, but the majority of his backing came from people that did not like the fact that Pope Paul VI was looking into the Knights of Malta and all these aristocratic clubs around the church that were using the church as their political tool. So, just some context there for you. Um, we need the Monroe Doctrine here in America to protect our national security as well as to protect that of our people who should be our immediate allies in South America, in Canada, etc. Um, these maneuvers underscore the threat the East Side Conservative Club and its allies pose to the U.S. national security. The leaders of the club are truly the silk stocking layer of international organized crime. Club leaders have all been linked to the propaganda duo lodge. Once again, direct link back to um, the fascist wing of radical traditional Catholicism. The propaganda duo Masonic Lodge, which was exposed by Italian magistrates as a center for the international narcotics and terrorist networks responsible for the kidnapping of General James Dossier and for repeated attempts to overthrow the U.S. allied government of Italy. Others have been linked to the Permindex Murder Incorporated Corporation, which has been implicated in the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Now, was implicated. There was actually a grand jury that came up with all of this stuff. Um, and Bertrand Russell himself, who is the skeptics, I don't know if he fingered Permindex, but Bertrand Russell himself, who all the skeptics look up at to as the Bill Nye or Neil deGrasse Tyson of the day, um, ran something called the Who Killed Kennedy Committee and was out there promoting Kennedy conspiracy theories. So if you think that being anti-conspiracy theory is high IQ, there's an example. The supposed highest IQ man in the world was out there running these kinds of things. And it was his secretary that sent, on behalf of Russell, probably, the initial Permindex clue that led Jim Garrison to go after Permindex. So, how do you explain that? You can't because you have a pea brain. Um, go back to watching Bill Nye, please. Corporation which has implicated in the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. It seems that to become a member of the club, the East Side Conservative Club, one must be willing to do business on a shady side of the law and to rub shoulders with some of the top organized crime families and fascists. The last issue of East Side Beaver, the club's newsletter, cites the following string of appointments for ESCC members in the Reagan administration. 1. William F. Buckley, Jr., appointed consultant on policy planning for the National Security Council. 2. John Shad, appointed chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission. 3. Tom Bolin, the club's chairman, appointed head of the Overseas Private Investment Corporation. 4. Maxwell Rapp, appointed U.S. ambassador to Italy. Jean Girard, appointed U.S. ambassador to the UNESCO. And Paul Dano, appointed to the advisory board of the Small Business Administration. Subheading: Tom Bolin in the GOP 2 Club. East Side Conservative Club Chairman Tom Bolin's membership in the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, a pseudo-Catholic association of the Italian oligarchy that has been condemned by Popes John the 23rd and Paul VI, justly earns the club the title GOP 2. Most of the military intelligence chiefs ousted by the Italian government for secret membership in the propaganda duo Masonic Lodge, which is an international control point for the highest levels of organized crime, narcotics trafficking, and both the Italian Red Brigades and neo-fascist terrorism are also members of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. Now, if you don't believe in the Red-Brown Alliance or Nazi communist movements, especially within the Rad-Trad community, just look at Carlism and look at where Carlism ended up. It ended up in the 1970s and later going extremely left-wing. It was a former fascist party, going extremely left-wing, and in the 1980s at some point, joining the United Left of Spain right next to the Soviet-controlled Communist Party and the Communist People's Party. So it's time to take off the red beret and stop LARPing. So other members of the Order of Malta have included Argentine dictator Juan Perón, the patron of Licio Gelli, the head of the P2 Lodge. This is the guy that founded the P2 Lodge with the Duke of Kent giving him the charter. The Duke of Kent, whose son now was the interim of the Dignitatis Humanae Institute, which Cardinal Burke has said is un-Catholic, which is running a lot of the traditional Catholic, or the pseudo-traditional Catholic, whatever you want to call it, very prominent in those circles today. It's kind of the command center of Catholic media, including people like Michael Voris's Church Militant. Um, Now he's Lord Windsor, who's the son of the Duke of Kent, still has his minions inside that organization, including Lord Guthrie, who was a director at Rothschild, um, N.H. Rothschild, I believe, and also involved in Ambrose Bank, which is directly linked to the P2 Lodge money laundering schemes. So, yeah, I mean, this is what people have been directing you away from, but is actually kind of central to the international aspect of these things. During his 20-year exile, Umberto, the head of the House of Savoy and pretender to the throne of Italy, Prince Gutierrez Spadafora, a collaborator with the P2 plotters and board of the Permandex assassination cabal, and Massimo Spada, an intimate business associate of Michel Sindona, who had been indicted on charges of drug trafficking in Italy and convicted of multiple charges of bank fraud. So those are all members of the Knights of Malta. Well, gee, wow. And if you look at Cardinal Burke again, Cardinal Burke says DHI is un-Catholic. Cardinal Burke was also briefly appointed to the Knights of Malta to oversee it, and I believe he was pushed out. So there could be a real battle within the higher echelons of Catholic high society, um, which is pushing Cardinal Burke out. And who knows? Maybe they'll rig a scandal against the guy. Although he's still in the immediate circles of Gloria Taxis, so I don't know if that's going to happen. In court testimony and statements of the FBI, Sindona admitted to being part of a P2 run plot in autumn of 1979 that was to restore the House of Savoy to power in Italy. Remember already, the House of Savoy, through Prince Giunio Borghese, he was a member of the House of Savoy, already tried to stage a coup in 1973. So here's yet another coup. Sindona named figures ranging from the Gambino organized crime family to Secretary of State Al Haig, former CIA Director Stansfield Turner, to the former Treasury Secretary David M. Kennedy as complicit in the plot from the American side. Bolin and Buckley's fellow club member Maxwell Rabb, the U.S. ambassador to Italy, provides another GOP 2 link. Until his appointment, Rabb was on the board of the Sterling National Bank, which handles all the financial operations for the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith. On January 29th, representatives of the Italian government filed a suit in New York which alleges that the Sterling Bank had carried out a $27 million fraud on behalf of the jailed Sindona. The suit, filed shortly after the release of General Dozier by his Red Brigade kidnappers, occurred in the midst of the massive crackdown by Italian magistrates against the mafia dope traffickers, Sindona among them, who financed the Red Brigades. The Italian government court papers show in painstaking detail how Michel Sindona and his associate, former Continental Illinois bank chairman and Mormon church leader David M. Kennedy, allegedly used the Sterling National Bank to milk $27 million out of Sindona's soon-to-be bankrupt Banca Privata Italiana into a maze of Swiss banks and thence into Sindona's Franklin National Bank. Sterling's Banca Privata partner in this alleged fraud has also been named as a funding conduit in earlier P2 Ron coup attempts in Italy, including the one in 1970 that included the fascist Prince Giunio Valerio Borghese. Thus, ESCC, the East Side Conservative Club, member Max Rabb is associated with the very circle seeking to overthrow democratic government in an allied country where he has been appointed to represent U.S. interests. And we see Mormon church links there. Bolin, Kwan in the courts. Serious question about also arise out of Bolin's own appointment as director of Overseas Private Investment Investment Corporation, a U.S. government agency which underwrites billions of dollars of insurance for strategically vital high-risk foreign investments. Had the Senate held public hearings on the Bolin appointment, it might have learned that Bolin, often together with Roy Cohn, his law partner in Sachs, Bacon, and Bolin, and a fellow ESCC leader, has repeatedly been investigated and tried for financial wrongdoing. In 1970, Bolin and Cohn were indicted in Illinois on felony charges for alleged violation of State Bank Holding Act against a company holding more than one bank in the same district. According to the New York Times coverage, Bolin refused to appear in court on these charges, remaining in New York, which did not share extradition with Illinois in this matter. A new judge ultimately quashed the indictments against Bolin and Cohn, but co-indictee Victor Muscat was found guilty, fined $20,000, and placed on the 5 years probation. Muscat Defiance Industries, which was found in violation of the Holding Act, shared interlocking ownership with the two firms whose board Bolin chaired, Gateway National Bank and Fifth Avenue Coach. In 1968-71, Fifth Avenue Coach became embroiled in a major scandal in New York. While Bolin faced civil charges, his loyal law partner, Roy Cohn, was the subject of an SEC investigation and trial on charges of bribery, conspiracy, blackmail, extortion, and filing false reports. The court enjoined him from violating the security laws. Cohn appeared in the decision and lost. Legal standards have been changed. Today, a similar warning would have been grounds for dismissal from the bar in most states, according to SEC attorney Tom Sonda. Roy Cohn, Permindex, and the Mafia. As EIR detailed in our April 20 special report on the Fascist International, the Permindex Murder Incorporated networks with whom Cohn is intimate have been charged with responsibility for dozens of unsuccessful attempts to assassinate French President Charles de Gaulle. And I believe these are real charges. So, meaning they were brought up in courts. According to unpublished reports compiling information provided by both U.S. and French intelligence, Cohn was present at 1963 meetings in Las Vegas, which allegedly involved planning the assassination of President Kennedy. These permanent P2 and allied mafia networks, which East Side Conservative Club leaders and associates with represent one of the gravest potential security threats to President Reagan. Cohn has been a frequent associate, business partner, and attorney for such organized crime figures as Louis Rosenthal, Carlo and Joe Gambino, Permindex Joe Bananas Bonanno, and Carmine Galante. On January 25, 1982, members of the Gambino crime family were indicted by a magistrate in Palermo, Sicily, for heroin trafficking in the United States. Michele Sindona also named members of the Gambino crime family as those who arranged his phony kidnapping in the autumn of 1979 so that he could take part in a P2 plot to overthrow the Italian government. Since Roy Cohn began his career as a protege of FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover and as a chief counsel for Senator Joe McCarthy in 1950, he stayed on the shady side of the law. In addition to indictments stemming from involvement with Tom Bolin's Fifth Avenue coach lines, Roy Cohn has been indicted on federal charges 3 times between 1964 and 1970. He has avoided paying $1 million in back taxes to the IRS by making himself legally impoverished through the transfer of his assets to his business partner, Paul Dono, another member of the East Side Conservative Club, who has been alleged in federal court testimony is Cohn's lover. A New York daily news commentary concluded it's hard to tell where Cohn begins and Dano ends. Since Cohn picked up Dano up off New York docks, Dano has done very well. He recently appointed to the Advisory Board of Small Business Administration because of his knack for managing high cash flow small businesses, of the sort frequently used for recycling for narcotics revenues and other ill-gotten cash. He says, I'm in the business of handling cash, food, and parking outlets. Dano's formula for how to succeed in business is revealed in his 1978 takeover of Universal Money Order Company, a check-cashing outfit whose former owner, Eugene Skowron, had run afoul of the law and hired Cohn to represent him. $80,000 later, Skowron pleaded guilty and was serving time in jail while his old business partner ended up in Dano's hands. Cohn has denied tipping off his friend and sometime roommate. Buckley gives them business. In our April 20th issue, EIR detailed the ties that respectable conservative leader William F. Buckley and his family maintained with the World Anti-Communist League and the Malmö International Cabal of European fascists, epitomized by Sir Oswald Mosley. Remember, in the immediate circles of A.K. G.K. Chesterton, the Hamsworths, the same people that are out there promoting Gurdjieff and New Age traditionalism, also promoting Catholic traditionalism, and by Colonel Otto Scarface Skorzeny, whom Hitler called my favorite commando. And Skorzeny also ran Operations Eagle Flight, where all of this money that the Nazis had taken from the government and from war seizures and selling assets that they stole from other countries. This stuff all went out into Swiss banks and banks in Turkey and banks all over the world. Scorzani was responsible for laundering all that money for these stay behind networks, and a lot of it most likely ended up in the hands of uh, this greater organization. Recent SEC investigations into the Buckley family's business uh, attest that they share the same business knack displayed by Dolan, Cohen, and Daniel. In two separate cases, the Buckley family's private Catawba Corporation and William Buckley's Star Broadcasting Corporation were found by the SEC to have engaged in consistent pattern of fraud and other SEC violations and were ordered to pay fines of nearly $1 million and $1.5 million, respectively. In the Star Broadcasting case, the SEC accused Buckley of willful fraud and levied one of the largest fines in a comparable case when Buckley arranged for the Star Broadcasting Group to purchase a chain of theaters of Texas that continually lost money. Buckley originally acquired these theaters with interest-free loans from SBG, Star Broadcasting Group, which had been established with Buckley as a chairman and a former employee on his yacht, Peter Starr, as president, to an investment fund Buckley set up called Citco. The SEC suit charged that Buckley and others knew at that time that Buckley faced personal bankruptcy unless SBG extricated the Citco partners from the precarious financial position. Since the end of World War II, the Catawba Corporation, chaired by Bill's brother John Buckley, has been at the heart of the family oil empire, which includes 6 tightly interlocked oil companies owning fields and leases from the North Sea to Australia. In a January 18, 1977 article entitled All in the Family, Few Shareholders Strike It Rich in the Buckley Oil Companies, Barron's reported on the SEC investigation into these firms, which showed the Buckleys and their partners manipulating them to milk profits at the expense of shareholders. In addition to this role as the head of Catawba, John Buckley was president of the Pantepec and United Canso. In 1975, the Buckleys initiated a proposal to turn over Pantepec's sole profit-making asset, the Magellan Corporation, which held interest in Australian natural gas fields, to the United Canso, which would have meant a substantial drop in the value of Pantepec stock. In the same year, Catawba negotiated the sale of United Canso's North Sea holdings, for which the company was paid $50,000. Instead of a standard broker's fee, John Buckley approved a $3.2 million payment to Catawba, and his sister Priscilla Buckley and their partners split a $750,000 dividend from Catawba. This is relevant to the appointment of the fellow East Side Conservative Club member John Shadd to head the Securities and Exchange Commission. Shadd's appointment was steered through Senate confirmation by Senator Alphonse D'Amato, Republican from New York, who learned a conflict of interest that was never questioned, namely that he is an investor in the Buckley family's oil firm United Canso, the subject of the SEC investigation. Further questions of morality. East Side Conservative Club leaders are some of the most outspoken advocates of legalized dope and sodomy. So here you have this guy who's got his fingers in every pie in terms of the Christian right, but specifically the Catholic right, and even the Roy Cohn is an attorney for Studio 54 Discotheque, a dispensary for cocaine, marijuana, and quaaludes. In its December 8, 1979 issue, the National Review cover story declared, "The time has come, abolish pot laws." The series of 4 propaganda pieces, including a signed editorial by Buckley calling for legalization, was used by the National Organization for Reform of Marijuana Laws, that is NORML, in its fundraising literature. Buckley has also admitted to the use of marijuana on my yacht outside the 3-mile limit. While not himself an avowed homosexual, in April 27, 1979 National Review column, Buckley considered homosexuals on the steps that they must take to make sodomy publicly acceptable. There's a lot more in terms of the connections to the drug lobby that they don't go into, things like the connections to Senator Jacob Javits. And maybe we'll find an article on that later on. But very interesting article. A lot better of an overview than some of the earlier articles that we read. So I hope you enjoyed that one. I was reading super fast because I've got there. This is a paid promotion. Go out and buy Guayaki Yerba Mate. It's a cult that's run in Brazil, I think, or Peru or something. Uh, we've always believed there was a magical tree in the rainforest with powers to unite and energize. So if green mate leaves. Reach deep into yerba mate culture, and you'll discover people have long gathered to imbibe mate to awaken the mind, perform extraordinary feats, and exchange confidences. Even Yuri, the mythical goddess of mate, decrees its symbol of friendship. So if you want to join the yerba mate cult, which is who I really represent, it's the next big cult to join the CNP alongside Falun Gong and the Moonies. Join the Yearbook Multi Cult with me. This is who IROM's actually sponsored by, is the Yerba Mate Cult. So have a good night or good day, whatever time it is. I work third shift, so I don't know anything about the time. And bye bye. I hope you enjoyed that one. We got another article coming up, I believe.